In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 14th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Iowa versus Purdue. You can feel this one before you even see a possession chart. Big winter night, Big Ten basketball, and a road team walking into Mackey that has not tasted a true road win yet this season. Purdue shows up with that whole "we have our stuff together" vibe. 15-1 overall, 5-0 in the league, sitting near the top of every poll, and they look like a group that has already figured out who they are and what they want to be. They run their offense like a routine in a factory, slow but precise, letting each possession breathe instead of rushing up shots. They defend well enough that opponents spend long stretches just trying to get something clean, and by the time they find it, the clock has bled away and the crowd is in full voice. Iowa is the interesting contrast. New voice on the sideline, new structure, still a really capable team, but you can see the growing pains when they leave Iowa City. The numbers tell you the basics, 12-4 overall and 2-3 in conference, but the real tell is that road line, 0-3 in true away games and on a mini skid after getting clipped by Illinois. At home they look confident. On a neutral floor they look loose. On the road, especially against a top program, the rhythm gets choppy, and that is where this matchup starts to tilt. Mackey is not just another building. It is one of those places that can turn a 6-point game into a 14-point game without the favorite really changing much. You get that wall of sound, a couple of defensive stands, and suddenly the underdog is not just playing the opponent, they are fighting the building and the moment. For a team that is still finding out how to win away from home, that is a rough test, especially when the opponent is built to squeeze games into a slower, more physical style that punishes every empty trip. Here is the thing, the spread is sitting in that classic "are you sure you trust the favorite this much" zone, around that 9.5, 10 area where a few mistakes late can flip tickets from happy to angry. Iowa has enough offense to hang around in stretches, but the way these two teams are built, one side is far more comfortable in a grind where every possession feels like it weighs double. If this turns into a game of half-court execution, board control, and poise in the last 8 minutes, there is one team that has been winning that exact script over and over and another that is still learning how to handle it, especially outside its own gym. As our first pick for this matchup, the Purdue Boilermakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On one hand, if you just glance at broad scoring averages, your brain might scream points. Purdue can put up mid-80s like it is a regular Tuesday, and Iowa has been living in the high 70s. Put those together, and you are staring at a combined expectation in the mid-160s, which is miles above a projected total in the low 140s. So it looks easy, right? Honestly, that is exactly why it is not easy. Those big scoring numbers are inflated by earlier games where both teams were facing softer defenses, more open floors, and less scouting familiarity. Conference play changes that story. Coaches know each other, the tendencies are on film, and the whistles get tighter. Possessions slow down, screens get more physical, and everybody is a little more willing to make you work 16, 18, even 20 seconds just to find a good shot. Purdue is a prime example of that tempo control. They are happy to walk the ball up, get into their sets, and live with games that feel like a long dental appointment for the opponent. Fewer possessions, more structure, and a constant emphasis on forcing you to guard for a full clock. That style alone drags totals down from what you would expect if you only checked raw points per game. Iowa, funnily enough, helps the under argument instead of blowing it up. They have turned into a defense that actually takes pride in each stop, holding opponents in that low 60s range on average. They have already stuffed a handful of teams into the 50s and low 60s when they can get their defense set, which is not what many people associate with that program's brand. The offense is still very capable, but it is not trying to race every trip, especially in a building like this where a run-and-gun approach can backfire fast if shots rim out. Here is where the betting side of your brain starts wrestling with itself. You see the big scoring resumes from November and early December, and you feel the temptation to expect a shootout. But the current version of these teams, in a Big Ten grinder on the road for Iowa, leans towards something more controlled. The total sits around 142.5, and the market is basically asking, do you trust the early season fireworks or the conference identity we are seeing now? If this game follows the pattern of Purdue controlling pace and Iowa leaning on its defense to survive possessions instead of turning it into a track meet, the scoring lands closer to a mid-70s to low 60s kind of script rather than a full-on fireworks show. Fewer trips, harder shots, and less of the wild late foul fest if one side gains real control, all point in the same direction. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Illinois versus Northwestern. Illinois heads up to Evanston tonight walking in like the confident neighbor that has finally figured out how to win road games in January, and that matters a lot when you start talking about who covers a decent-sized number. They are sitting at 13-3 overall and 4-1 in league play, and it is not smoke and mirrors. It is built on a real identity that actually travels. You see it in how they bully the glass, how they stay out of foul trouble, and how they just keep sending in waves of length and size that most Big Ten teams cannot match for a full 40 minutes. On offense, Illinois plays with a kind of calm aggression. They are not racing around like a pure track meet team, but every trip feels purposeful. They run good stuff, they space you with shooting, and then they let that long backcourt pick apart matchups instead of forcing things. That is how you end up with one of the top offenses in the country by the efficiency nerd charts, still scoring in the mid-80s per game, but without needing chaos to get there. It is method more than madness, which is exactly what you want when you are trying to win by margin on the road instead of just survive. Then there is the size piece, and it really shows up once you get past the first media timeout. Illinois throws out lineups where almost everyone on the floor can either shoot, post, or offensive rebound, sometimes all three. That combination is nasty for a defense. You can take away the first action, maybe even the second, but when they miss, the possession often does not end. They lead the league in second chance scoring, and that is not just a fun stat, it is a tax. Every offensive board is one more close-range look, one more chance to stretch a 6-point lead to 9, or a 9-point lead to double digits. Over 30 to 5 minutes, that grind is exactly how favorites separate. Defensively, Illinois is not trying to win style points, they are trying to win the math. They foul very little, they sit at the absolute top of the national charts in keeping opponents off the free throw line. And that is huge. If you are laying points with a team, you want a defense that makes the opponent actually hit shots instead of living on freebies. Illinois basically tells you, if you want to keep up, you have to score over length and without the whistle saving you, and most teams do not love that deal. It also means when they do get ahead, they are less likely to hand the opponent cheap points that backdoor your spread late. Now line that up with where Northwestern is right now. On paper, an 8-8 record with a 0-5 start in the Big Ten looks rough, but it is the way they are losing that really jumps off the screen. They have been living in these tight, emotional games, including that overtime gut punch at Rutgers where they could not quite close the door despite a career night from their star scorer. There is talent here, there is coaching here. It is not some hopeless roster, but the gaps are in places that matter a lot when you are trying to stand up to a physical favorite. Northwestern actually takes beautiful care of the ball, and they are right at the top of the country in assist-to-turnover ratio, which tells you they share it, they see the floor, and they rarely just cough it up for no reason. That is the part of their profile that screams live underdog on some nights. The problem is what happens after the shot goes up. They sit near the bottom of the Big Ten in rebounding margin, and you can feel it. They can play a possession perfectly for 25 seconds, force a tough jumper, then watch Illinois grab the miss and reset the whole thing at the rim. That is demoralizing for a home dog and exactly the kind of thing that breaks spreads apart. Then you zoom in on their shooting profile. Northwestern is scary when the jumper is falling, but they have been near the bottom of the league in three-point percentage, and the free throw line has not been a comfort zone either. You could see it in that Rutgers loss, where misses at the stripe and from deep kept giving the game back. Now they get an Illinois defense that does not foul much and does not gift easy rhythm looks, and suddenly that margin for error shrinks. If you are trying to hang with a high-powered favorite while also losing the rebounding battle and struggling at the line, you are walking a tightrope with no net. There is also the emotional baggage of Welsh Ryan. Northwestern has nicked Illinois at home 3 straight years, including overtime heartbreakers that still make Illini fans wince. Oddly, that almost helps Illinois here. This group is very aware of that mini-hex, and you can feel there is a little extra edge in how they have been handling road games. Instead of walking in casual, they are treating these hostile gyms like resume statements. That combination of revenge energy, grown-up guard play, and structural advantages on the glass and at the foul line lines up much more cleanly with the favorite covering than the underdog sneaking inside the number. As our first pick for this matchup, Illinois to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On the surface, you see Illinois averaging about 86 points per game and Northwestern living around the upper 70s, and your brain immediately starts doing the quick math and thinking, okay, this could flirt with fireworks. But totals are less about raw scoring averages and more about how the game is likely to breathe tonight, minute to minute. Illinois does not actually need a wild tempo to score. Their offense is efficient, not frantic. They trust half-court execution, and they are very comfortable grinding through sets, hunting mismatches, and letting size and skill win late in the clock. People see the high-scoring numbers and assume track meet, but it is more like a well-run factory, steady and productive, not a startup chugging energy drinks. That matters because efficient offense at a measured pace often produces comfortable wins without necessarily dragging the total into the stratosphere. Northwestern, on the other hand, already prefers a slower, more measured rhythm. By the tempo metrics, they are sitting below the national average, and that matches what your eyes see. A lot of their possessions start with patience. They run through actions, probe, reverse the ball, and lean on their star to manufacture something late in the clock. It is smart basketball for them, but it does pull the overall possession count down, and totals depend heavily on how many possessions we actually get. Then you factor in the way these two styles clash. Illinois wants to own the glass and avoid fouls. Northwestern wants to move the ball and avoid turnovers. None of that screams frenzied, whistle-heavy game where both teams live at the line. In fact, Illinois is one of the very best teams in the country at keeping opponents off the stripe, and Northwestern has already shown that when they do get there, it is not exactly automatic. So we are talking about a matchup where one team is elite at limiting free throws, and the other is not great at converting them when they appear. That combination quietly drains points off a total. Three-point shooting does not scream shootout either. Illinois can absolutely hit from outside, but their offense is not built on launching 33s and praying. They are balanced. Northwestern, meanwhile, has been stuck near the bottom of the Big Ten from deep and has had some brutal nights where open looks just refuse to fall. You saw it again against Rutgers, where the line looked playable and the ball still would not cooperate. If they need to keep up on the scoreboard against a strong defense while also dragging around that shooting inconsistency, the likeliest outcome is more empty trips and longer cold patches, not a clean, back-and-forth barrage. Game script matters too, and rivalry games in the middle of conference season tend to tighten up rather than completely explode. Both coaching staffs know each other well. There is a lot of film, a lot of scouting, and a lot of emotional weight attached to every possession. Those nights often turn into make-you-work games, where defenses are tuned in, rotations are sharp, and coaches are much quicker to slow things down to stop runs. Even Illinois, with that high-powered offense, has already shown they are happy to sit on a lead and make opponents score in the half-court instead of trading rushed possessions. You can also feel the pressure on Northwestern. They are trying to stop a Big Ten skid, calm late-game demons, and protect a building where they have actually punched above their weight against this opponent. Teams in that spot usually do not want a wild, up-and-down race. They want control. That often looks like longer possessions, more deliberate shot selection, and a real effort to limit Illinois' transition chances by getting bodies back instead of crashing the offensive glass recklessly. All of that is smart from their side, but for the total, it points in a very specific direction. When you blend all of this together, you do not get a game that screams chaos, fouls, and constant fast breaks. You get something closer to a tough, fairly physical Big Ten grinder with pockets of offense, a lot of half-court possessions, and a scoreboard that lands lower than the pure scoring averages might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UCLA versus Penn State. Big Ten winter hoops in State College has a certain feel to it, and this one fits right in. You have UCLA crossing the country into a cold midweek night, into a loud student section, and the odds makers holding up a small number, asking if the visiting brand power is really worth that extra tax. Penn State comes in with a record of 9-7 overall and 0-5 in conference that looks rough on the surface, but the story under it is a lot more stubborn. They have gone punch for punch with Michigan, Purdue, and Illinois, taken 3 losses by a combined 18 points, and walked off the floor each time looking more like a dangerous underdog than a doormat. On the other side, UCLA's 11-5 overall and 3-2 in league play does not scream super team, but it does tell you one clear thing: they are stable. Their whole personality leans into structure, into that half-court patience where every possession feels like a small project plan rather than an impulse. They keep opponents around the high 60s to low 70s. They contest shots, and they usually force you to work longer in the clock than you want to. That is important against a Penn State group that has leaned heavily on guard creativity and shot making, while living with a defense that gives up more clean looks than you would like if you are backing the home side. Here is the thing that quietly swings the matchup conversation. Penn State has been trying to rewire its offense on the fly without freshman point guard Caden Mingo, who was leading them in scoring, assists, and steals before a broken nose and surgery put him on the shelf indefinitely. He is not some role player you patch over. He is the guy who turns broken plays into something, and without him, possessions tilt from attack to survive the shot clock a lot faster. That is a tough reality against a UCLA defense that already travels well and is built to choke off first options and then sit on your counters. UCLA is not without its own questions. Skylar Clark's hamstring issue has kept one of their best shooters in street clothes recently, and his status sits in that gray area, not fully ruled in, not fully ruled out. The key, though, is that the Bruins have still shown they can function through other ball handlers and keep that defensive identity intact, which is what really matters on a tricky road floor. When you strip away the logos and lean on the basic matchup, it is the team with the better defense, the cleaner average scoring margin, and the steadier late-game execution that tends to cash this kind of short spread more often than not. As our first pick for this matchup, the UCLA Bruins to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now, let us talk about the total, because that number in the low 150s, centered around 151.5, is really the market asking a simple question. Is this going to be a free-flowing game that feels like a pickup run, or a more methodical conference grinder where every bucket feels earned? Both of these teams sit around that 70 possessions per game neighborhood, so neither one is wired for full track meet mode as a default. The real story is who gets to steer the tempo of those trips up and down the floor. Without Mingo, Penn State's offense naturally slows down. He is the guy who pushes early, who sees that little opening before the defense is set, and his absence nudges the Nittany Lions toward more half-court sets and more let us find something late in the clock possessions. Against this UCLA defense, that often means 2 or 3 actions, then someone having to create a tough shot with a hand in their face. That style eats time. It also tends to shrink runs before they really snowball. On the UCLA side, the offense is solid but not reckless. They are comfortable living in the 70s rather than chasing an 80-plus track meet, and they do it by sharing the ball, taking reasonable shots, and not wasting trips with wild early threes. You can almost picture the rhythm. They walk it up, run their sets, probe the lane, maybe kick for a good 3 rather than a rushed one. In a Big Ten building in mid-January, with a physical officiating crew that usually lets some contact go, that kind of game flow pushes scores down in small, steady ways. There is also that familiar conference pattern where, once the game tightens late, both sides start valuing each possession like it is a pay-per-view event. Whoever is up is milking clock. Whoever is chasing is running offense but trying not to hand away free points with panicked shots. You might still see a mini scoring burst from fouls and free throws in the final minute because that is college basketball, but the larger script here still leans toward a game that feels more like a grind than a fireworks show. So when you stack the pace profile, the missing primary creator for Penn State, and the way UCLA is comfortable living in controlled, possession-by-possession basketball, the path that keeps this thing under the posted number is very easy to visualize. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Vanderbilt versus Texas. You look at this matchup and it just feels big, right? An undefeated Vanderbilt group walking into a loud building, a proud Texas program trying to convince everyone that the up and down start is just turbulence and not a full identity crisis, and a spread that basically asks whether you trust the juggernaut or the desperate home dog. Texas gets the crowd, the sight lines, the rims they see every day, but Vanderbilt walks in with something you cannot fake, a resume that already looks like a season's worth of prove-it wins. 16-0 overall, 3-0 in the league, a scoring margin north of 20 points per night, and that is not built on guarantee games alone. It is backed by handling LSU and Alabama in back-to-back conference tests without blinking. When a team has already answered the "what happens when somebody punches you back" question, it changes how you read a road favorite tag, because they have already been in the fire and come out looking comfortable. What makes Vanderbilt so tricky for a number like this is that their style rarely gives you a fake final score. They play with multiple ball handlers, space you out, spray the ball around, and when they are locked in, they turn games into long stretches where the opponent is basically chasing ghosts. They average over 90 points a night while shooting better than 50% from the field and almost 11 made threes per game. And that is not just pretty offense, it is relentless pressure that forces opposing defenses to choose which leak they want to plug first. If you are laying points on the road, you prefer a favorite whose offense travels, and everything in Vanderbilt's profile screams that their scoring is not just a home whistle mirage. Now, Texas is not some plucky mid-major story. They have their own real weapons. They score almost 88 a game themselves, and when they are humming, it looks like a pickup run where the most talented team called next and never gave the court back. Jordan Pope can heat up from deep in a hurry. Dalen Swain puts pressure on the rim and the glass. Trauman Mark is that kind of long wing who can live in the gaps between your help and your recovery. And Matas Vokatatis is constantly hunting contact at the foul line. We just watched that mix walk into Alabama and hang 92 in Tuscaloosa, so there is real punch here. And that is exactly why the spread is not some cartoon blowout number. Here is the thing, though. Texas' personality this season has been loud but unstable. They can hang 100 in one game, then look like they are playing defense on a delay the next. That Mississippi State loss at home where they gave up 101, then the bounce back at Alabama with 92 of their own, is a perfect snapshot of a team that can live in wild swings. If you are catching points with a group like that, you love volatility and chaos. If you are laying points on the road with a much steadier undefeated side, you quietly welcome that same volatility because it creates more possessions where your superior consistency can show. Vanderbilt, even without Frankie Collins, has shown they can absorb hits to the backcourt and still keep the engine running. Collins' torn meniscus and his current out for at least a while status mean Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles are doing even more steering, and they have responded by stacking wins over ranked teams anyway. George Kimball III is also sidelined long-term with a knee issue, which does thin the guard room on paper, but the rotation on the floor has not looked fragile. Texas, by contrast, actually comes in clean on the injury sheet, which should be a big plus, yet they still have those defensive lapses and rebounding dips that show up in the game notes and in the final scores. When the healthier team is also the less predictable one, that usually tells you more about their habits than their training room. One thing bettors sometimes underestimate in spots like this is how an unbeaten record changes a team's mental wiring. Vanderbilt is not sneaking up on anyone anymore. They are ranked in the top 10 of the AP poll. Their coach is getting national attention, and every broadcast crew has a segment ready about their shot profile. That can make some teams tight. So far, it has made this one sharper. They have already handled a Bahamas tournament, true road trips, and the physical grind of the SEC's opening week. When you see a favorite that has repeatedly validated its rating against step-up competition, you start to trust that the number is not inflated hype. It is a reflection of a real separation. Texas absolutely has a puncher's chance to pull another upset in their own building, and for stretches they might even look like the better team. But matchup by matchup, possession by possession, Vanderbilt's ability to generate clean looks, protect the ball, and force turnovers with that aggressive guard trio has simply been more reliable than Texas' game-to-game effort on the defensive end. So when the spread sits in that you have to be meaningfully better zone rather than a pure coin flip number, the case tilts toward the side that has been playing at a consistently higher level rather than the side searching for its ceiling. As our first pick for this matchup, the Vanderbilt Commodores to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now let us talk about the fun part for a neutral fan, the total. You see a number in the mid-160s and your first reaction is almost always, is that a typo? Books are basically telling you they expect stretches of this game to look like an NBA-style track meet, and honestly, with these two, that is not a wild assumption at all. Start with what we already know. Vanderbilt is putting up 93 points per night on its own while giving up just over 72. And they are doing that with both volume and efficiency, over 50% from the floor and close to 11 made threes per game. Texas is not far behind on the scoring side, almost 88 per game, with solid shooting splits and a healthy number of threes, and their defense is good enough to win but not so stingy that it drags games into the mud. That is basically the recipe for high totals: two offenses that can score in bunches and defenses that are more bend and survive than strangle everything. We have real game film, not just spreadsheets, that backs up the idea that this can soar. Look at Vanderbilt's recent stretch. They played Alabama in a whistle fest that still ended 96-90, then followed it by grinding through cold second half shooting and still getting to 84-73 against LSU. Go back a bit further and you see them hanging 100+ on Texas Southern in a 109-74 blowout, and triple-digit nights were practically routine in the non-conference. Even when the threes stop falling for a stretch, the volume, the free throws, and the pace keep the scoreboard rolling. Texas has quietly been living in that same neighborhood. They just played a 101-98 overtime loss to Mississippi State in their SEC opener, then walked into Alabama's gym and won 92-88. Add in games like the 95-69 handling of Southern and the 94-71 win over Maryland Eastern Shore, and you have a pretty clear picture of an offense that likes to keep the accelerator pressed. This is not a team that is trying to bleed the shot clock just to play a rock fight. Stylistically, the matchup encourages points rather than suppresses them. Vanderbilt chucks nearly 29 threes per game and makes almost 11, which stretches a defense horizontally and opens lanes for back cuts, slips, and drives. Texas, with Volkutitis and company, likes to attack inside, get to the stripe, and turn every possession into a test of whether you are willing to absorb contact for 40 minutes. Put those together and you get a game where the clock stops a lot for free throws, long rebounds spark transition, and both coaches are incentivized to keep up, not slow down. There is also a trend piece underneath all of this that quietly supports the big number. Texas has hit the game total over in 24 of its last 34 dating back through this run, which is exactly what you would expect from a team with a good offense and a leaky enough defense to give some of it back. Vanderbilt, on the other side, has only gone under the full game total in 14 of its last 33, which means the default setting on their games recently has been higher than the market thought, even as odds makers kept ratcheting these totals up. When both clubs carry that kind of over-friendly resume into the same building, it is a hint that their style is not an accident, it is who they are. Could this still sneak under? Sure, if Vanderbilt's defense plays one of its sharper road games, if Texas' shot selection regresses after the high of Tuscaloosa, if the whistle gets swallowed and both teams settle for contested jumpers, that is the script for a surprising lower scoring outcome. But we already have an LSU game where Vanderbilt went 1 for 15 from deep in the second half and still pushed into the mid-150s. And we already have a Texas sample where a bad defensive night turned into a 101-98 overtime circus. When your things went wrong examples are still flirting with the mid-150s to high 190s, you are looking at a matchup where the floor for points is unusually high. So if you strip away the fear of a big number and just ask, what kind of game do these two usually play? The answer keeps pointing the same way. High-tempo stretches, aggressive downhill attacks, plenty of free throws, lots of threes, and coaches who are more likely to tweak lineups than to slam the brakes. For a total sitting in the mid-160s, that kind of environment does not guarantee anything, but it does tilt the long-term math toward expecting more scoring fireworks than the average college game. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Utah versus Texas Tech. Texas Tech walks into this game looking like the veteran of a street fight, and Utah feels more like the neighbor who just wandered into the alley because they heard noise and wanted to see what was going on. Tech sits at 12-4, sitting 15th in the AP poll, and has not dropped a single home game yet, 8-0 in Lubbock. Utah, on the other hand, is sitting at 8-8, 0-3 in Big 12 play, and that recent skid includes a gut punch of a home loss to BYU where they still could not get a key stop late. You can feel the contrast already. Utah's first year under Alex Jensen is still in that awkward phase where the offense and defense are not speaking the same language yet. The attack looks lively enough, but the defensive numbers tell a different story, with the Utes giving up around 1.08 points per possession and landing way down the national efficiency charts. So when you drop that version of Utah into a true Big 12 road environment against a Texas Tech team that scores in the low 80s per game and wins by close to double digits on average, the matchup starts to tilt in a pretty clear direction. This is not just about raw firepower either, it is about how Tech likes to lean on you for 40 minutes. Look at what Texas Tech just did in their last 2 conference tests. They built a big lead on the road at Colorado, up by more than 20 at one point, and went punch for punch with Houston in a game that turned into a half-court wrestling match. That tells you something simple but important. They can win if the game gets fast, and they can still hang if the game slows down and every possession feels like a tax audit. That is exactly the kind of profile that tends to play very well at home against a shaky defense that has not yet proved it can travel. Inside, Tech has that physical front line that does the dirty work, cleaning the glass and punishing the rim, the sort of stuff that does not always show up in highlight mixes but shows up very clearly in the scoreboard margin. On the perimeter, they have enough playmaking and shot creation that you cannot just load up on one guy and feel safe. Utah does have a bright spot with Terrence Brown, who just hung 25 points on BYU and can keep them in touch for stretches with tough shot making. But so far, those bursts have mostly kept games respectable, not flipped them on their head. Now, layer in the betting side of things for a second. Utah has been rough against the spread, with far more tickets burned than cashed, while Texas Tech has handled business straight up in their own building. The Utes have not yet proved they can handle the full Big 12 road experience, and this is not exactly easing into it. This is walking straight into a ranked team that is already comfortable in its identity. Utah is also dealing with depth issues, with key rotation pieces already ruled out for the season and others still sitting on the sideline, which tightens the screws even more when foul trouble or fatigue hits. Tech, by contrast, has mostly dealt with depth questions on the margins, while their main offensive core has been on the floor in the recent showdowns with Houston and Colorado, which is what matters for a spread like this. So when you add up the home edge, the physical style, the more stable rotation, and Utah's ongoing struggles against the number, you get a spot where the favorite is not just better on paper, it is better in all the little game flow moments that usually decide whether a large spread is covered or not. As our first pick for this matchup, the Texas Tech Red Raiders to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now let us talk about the total, because that number floating up in the high 150s to low 160s range is loud all by itself. Books are basically asking you, are you ready to sign up for a track meet? On the surface, Utah has absolutely earned a number that big. They have been an over machine, cashing overs in most of their games, 12 of 16, with an offense that likes to shoot, a defense that springs leaks, and a general pattern of games that feel like pickup runs more than slow, methodical chess matches. But here is the thing, not every game lets that version of Utah show up. Totals are not just about what one team wants, they are about what both teams can actually impose over 40 minutes. Texas Tech, for all their scoring, often plays at a tempo that is closer to steady jog than all-out sprint. You can see it in recent scorelines. That Houston game landed in the mid-130s, and the Colorado game sat in the mid-140s, even though there were stretches where both teams were getting to the line and hitting shots. That tells you the underlying pace is more modest, and the defense is strong enough to drag the total down a bit, even when the offenses are not cold. Utah's profile is a little sneaky here too. Their pace sits in that low 70 possessions per game pocket, which is more normal college game than fast and furious reboot. A lot of their high totals come from games where both teams are happy to trade, the defense gets carved up, and no one ever really grabs control of tempo. Against a team that is comfortable getting back, setting the defense, and forcing you to play in the half court, that kind of open floor scoring can get choked off pretty quickly. There is also a human element that numbers hint at but do not fully capture. Utah's rotation is already shortened by injuries and absences, which means the guys who are playing are carrying heavier loads. In a high-energy environment, legs tend to go first, and when that happens you see tired jumpers, shorter drives, and more empty possessions, especially late. At the same time, once a game starts to settle, coaches who value structure often slow things down even more, calling sets, milking clock, and trading a few extra possessions for control. When totals are this high, even a small amount of late-game slowdown can be the difference between a circus score and a number that sneaks in under what the market asked for. So while Utah's season-long pattern of overs jumps off the page, this specific matchup feels different. One side prefers a more controlled tempo at home, the other side arrives with tired legs and a defense that might finally run into an opponent that does not let the game spiral into chaos. If this turns into more of a half-court story, with both teams having to work for clean looks on most trips, that lofty total starts to wobble a bit. You can still get scoring runs, you can still get stretches where it feels like nobody misses, but over the full 40 minutes, the most likely script looks a little lower scoring than the raw season overs suggest, especially with such a big number on the board. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.